Tonight, it's the honor of the administration, faculty, staff, and students of HWS to recognize the nation's 20 million living military veterans, about 10% of whom are women, as well as the many millions who have gone before them. Our panel of veterans spans some 7 decades of service around the world. We are aware of 600 HWS alums who served, but there are certainly more. If you are a vet, please let us know through the admissions website. You can email me directly at msage@hws.edu. Dick Anderegg, 67, also known as Lucky, is this evening's moderator. He is an honor graduate of Hobart's Air Force ROTC program and served in the Air Force 30 years as a fighter pilot in F-4 Phantoms and F-15 Eagles. He flew 170 combat missions in the Vietnam War. After retiring from active duty, he came back to the Air Force as the Chief of Air Force History and Museums for 10 years. He has several books to his credit, one of which he will speak about tonight. Over to you, Dick.
Thanks very much, Mel, and thanks to your office and you and Cristal and Nicholas for helping us with all the technical and the backup and the administrative side of this. We really appreciate it. I want to say that up front because I know you have to leave early. And I thank you. I thank all the vets who are in our audience. Thank you for your service. Everyone appreciates it, including us and those who have not served in the military at all. Our panelists today, as Mel said, span 7 decades of service around the world. And I'm going to very briefly introduce each of them to you. And then we'll let each of them speak after that. First is Lieutenant John Norvell, Hobart 66, as a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, retired as a combat veteran of Vietnam, in fighters, by the way. Commander Dr. Jackie LeMay, U.S. Navy, retired just recently, William Smith 99, who served 20 years as a flight surgeon and an OB/GYN surgeon. Carmen Chimini, Hobart 10, served as a Green Beret and combat diver. Georgi Bakauri, Hobart 25, served 7 years as a U.S. Navy corpsman before attending to Hobart. Jay McCoy, Hobart 22, currently an EMT in Boston, who will enter the Coast Guard in 3 weeks. And my wife sitting beside me, Jean Sutherland Anderegg, who has gone through everything just about in the Air Force that I went through and knows a lot. And her father was retired from the Army. Okay, so individually, you can expand on your bios a little bit. Over to Norvell.
Dick seems to have frozen, so I'm John Norvell. He posed the question of why service and why did we individually join. I have 2 reasons. From my family history, if you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, I'm the Lieutenant Dan of Hobart. I have military ancestors going back to the colonial period in America. My 6th great-grandfather was a captain in the Virginia militia. My 3rd great-grandfather was a lieutenant in the Revolutionary War and a POW of the British in Charleston. His 4 sons fought in the War of 1812. My great-grandfather was a Marine lieutenant in the halls of Montezuma and later a colonel for the Union in the Civil War. And my dad was a master sergeant. Believe me, it's a tough road to hoe when you grow up with a master sergeant for a father and fought in World War II in Korea. So I had the family history behind me to serve in the military. But added to that, I wanted to fly. I always wanted to fly. I grew up in the 1950s when the Air Force was really in the news a lot. The astronauts were in the news, and I wanted to be a pilot when I got out of Hobart. Well, that didn't work so well. I failed my flight physical. I got stuck in a dead-end job for 4 years in a command post. I finally got into nav school about 5 years after commissioning as a lieutenant. I then went a year later after NAV school to the F4, immediately combat and SEA. And my small claim to fame was I flew on the last F4 combat mission of the Vietnam Air War. From there, I went to flying in Alaska. From there, I was a history professor for a while at the Air Force Academy. Finally, I was the executive officer for the historian of the Air Force, a job Dick had later on under a different title. And then I ended up as alumni director at Hobart from 1993 to 2002. So I was there when some of you graduated. So that's basically my story. And I'll pass it on to the next panelist.
Okay, Jackie, you're up.
Oh boy, I get to start, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, as like you said, I'm Jackie LeMay. I was a 99 William Smith graduate. I do not have a significant family history of military service, but I, for whatever reason, was kind of drawn to it in high school. Also, really had wanted to fly, had liked the idea of flying, so had applied to the Coast Guard Academy as well as HWS. Ended up staying at HWS, somewhat because I decided in that time that I wanted to go into medicine rather than aviation. And then when I was applying to medical school, was trying to figure out how in the world I was going to pay for it. And somebody mentioned the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, which is the military's medical school. So it's kind of like going to the academy, but you're a medical student the entire time, but you're on active duty. So I applied. When I was interviewing, it was probably the happiest and most collegial group of medical students at the time that I had ever seen, because it was just, it's such a collaborative group. You know, you're going to be working with these people for the next 20 plus years. So a lot of the competition that's at other medical schools wasn't there. And they were going to pay me while I was in medical school instead of several $100,000 in loans. So I started at USIS. I went to officer indoctrination school in the summer of 2001. So I was a first year medical student when 9/11 happened. Meant that our mission changed a whole lot while I was in medical school. I went after graduating medical school in 2005, went and did an internship in Jacksonville, Florida, actually in family medicine. And then from there went to flight school as a flight surgeon, which is basically primary care doctor for aviation, for the pilots and the air crew. You're their personal doctor. You're not a surgeon. It's a holdover term from the Civil War, where any doctor assigned to the unit was considered a surgeon. But you're the one that decides whether or not they're safe to fly, whether or not they can take certain medications. You deploy with them. You pretty much do everything with them. From there, I went up to Whidbey Island, up here in Washington State, and I was with VQ2, which is no longer exists, but it was essentially a surveillance squadron. Let's just leave it at that. And I did lots of short missions all over the place. I would have 3 to 4 crews in certain places around the world, and I would hop from site to site for a couple of years. After that, I decided to do a second tour, and I joined the MFA 232, which is a Marine F-18 squadron down in Miramar, California for a couple of years. Deployed with them to Afghanistan. We were the first Marine F-18 unit on the ground in Afghanistan. I was also the first female officer the squadron had ever had. So that was definitely an experience. That was 2009 to 2011. We were in Afghanistan in 2010. And then from there, I had decided that I was going to transition into OBGYN. I had thought about OBGYN before, but I knew I wanted to do flight surgery, and I knew I wanted to deploy, and family medicine was a little bit of a better preparation for what I was going to be doing as a flight surgeon. But I decided to transition to OBGYN. A lot of that's because of the experiences I had as a flight surgeon and taking care of the females in my units, and just seeing the differences in the care that was available, the comfort level that they had with medical, what they were able to access, what they weren't able to access, and really wanting to be able to improve that and make some changes when it came to women's healthcare in the military. I did residency in San Diego, and then from residency, I actually was selected to do fellowship in complex family planning. I am so far the only person in the military who has been allowed to do that fellowship. Um, Fingers crossed that that might change again at some point in time, but not yet. Um, and I was involved in a lot of the policy changes that had been happening, are now being reversed, but was very involved in a lot of that stuff. Did fellowship at a civilian program in Oregon, and then got stationed in Okinawa, Japan. I was in Okinawa for 3 years. I was the department head in Okinawa, the department head for the OBGYN department in Oki. Came back to Bremerton, Naval Hospital Bremerton up here in Washington for a few years, was the MEC chair, which is the Medical Executive Committee. Basically, it's a committee of various physicians and physician-led groups. The person that kind of takes care of credentialing and any of those types of issues. After 3 years here, they sent me back to Japan, this time to Iwakuni, which is a little tiny base about 45 minutes from Hiroshima. I was there for a year and then came back here for my last year on active duty and retired in August. And right now I'm semi-retired and working part-time for a private practice in Seattle, and enjoying not working the 80+ hour weeks anymore. But
Great.
yeah,
Okay,
that's
thank
it.
you. Okay, Carmen, you're up.
All right, sounds good. Tough to follow Jackie on that. Much more decorated than I am. So Carmen Trini, class of 2010. I was a Special Forces combat medic, also known as a Green Beret of the Army. Served for 7 years. Born and raised Newport Beach, California. Wanted to go for a change of scenery. Went to Hobart College. Most of my family was from up there, so I did visit Hobart on a summer day and was tricked by that. But enjoyed my 4 years out there and was on the crew team as well. Was a captain. After that, or I majored in biology and environmental studies. After that, worked on the BP oil spill for a couple years down in the Gulf Coast, literally scrubbing the oil off ducts and managing crews for a while, and then went and came back to California and worked for a solar startup, just doing like residential solar sales. One thing I wanted to mention is during my time at Hobart, in between junior and senior year of college, I went to officer candidate school for the Marine Corps and actually made it through, was offered a commission and turned it down. My parents were very, very against me going into the military, so I followed my degree, which is why I did the biology and environmental route. 27, I still wanted to join. So I went back to the Marine Corps recruiter and told him I wanted my commission, and they said, "Get the heck out of my office. You already turned us down." Walked over to the Army recruiter, said, "I think I might be cut out for Special Forces." Did the PT test, took the ASVAB for the whatever the IQ type thing, and made it through that. So enlisted. From the time that I enlisted to the time that I got my Green Beret, it's about a 3 to 3.5 year training process. Did most of that out at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Went to jump school out there. Started my first year of going through the Special Operations Combat Medic School, and then you go through the Q course out there in Fort Bragg as well, and that's also like a 2 to 2.5 year process within that timeline. Luckily, made it through all that training. The attrition rate's pretty high. You know, I started with 140 people in the pipeline, and only 14 made it through. So with that, there is just whether it's injury or getting dropped, it's a tough program to make it through. After that, went to First Special Forces Group up in Washington State, about 45 minutes south of Seattle, and was supposed to go to Singapore, Thailand, Korea, and Afghanistan, and none of it happened. COVID knocked out the first three for the JSETs, and then Afghanistan, the war ended. So I got out after 7 years, and I feel like a stolen valor guy, where I went all over the place. Went to Hawaii for jungle school and Key West for combat dive school. Yuma, Arizona to jump out of airplanes and never got to use any of it. So with that, decided to hang it up. No regrets at all. And went to USC Business School, used my GI Bill for that. And currently I'm at Wells Fargo, an investment banker in LA. But just wanted to give that full spectrum, and I'll take more questions later, but I'll hand it off to the next person.
Great, thank you very much. Georgi.
Well, it might be even harder for me to follow that up. But so I served actually prior to coming to Hobart. I spent 7 years in the United States Navy, doing the less cool version of Carmen's job. I was a Navy corpsman, so the Navy's version of a medic. I spent my first duty station was working in actually a joint hospital outside of Washington D.C. At the time, it was Fort Belvoir Community Hospital. It's still on Fort Belvoir. It's called something different now. But had a really fantastic time learning there. A lot of respect for Navy medicine. Learned a little bit from some Army 68 whiskeys as well. I worked in the medical surgical unit and the ICU while I was there. So really got a very really cool wide range of medical experience while I was there. I really wanted to do sort of the pinnacle of being a corpsman, which is to go and get to operate with the Marines since they don't have their own medics. So they use Navy medics. So I got the chance to do that. I went down to first Camp Lejeune and I did 2 months of training down there. And then I got to choose my battalion. Myself and a group of my friends, we all really wanted to go to 7th Marines, which is stationed out middle of the desert down in Southern California, 29 Palms. When people would ask me, "Oh, you're in the Navy, where are you stationed?" I would say, "If you go to Palm Springs, then you just keep driving another an hour and a half into the middle of nowhere in the desert. That's where I'm at." So not a drop of water to be seen. But I spent about 3.5 years out there with 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. I really enjoyed it. I got to finally do my time as a platoon corpsman, so got really close to my Marines. Running around in the dirt with them, having a lot of fun. I had the opportunity to go with a group of us. Actually, went down to Coronado, California, and got to go through an amphibious raid scout swimmers course. It was a lot of fun swimming around in the dark in the ocean. Had some close encounters with some sea lions, which was scarier than it sounds at the time. And then my battalion, we did similarly. I was really hoping for sort of a tail end Afghan deployment. That's why I kind of picked that unit that's stuck in the desert. And then I was on the historic first deployment of 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines to Okinawa since the end of World War II. So I still a fantastic deployment. Went out there, got to do some cool jungle warfare training. Got on some Navy ships for the first time in my career. Finally, not as a member of the crew, but just with the Marines. Came back, and then at that point, I'd made rank a few times, and I had about a year left on my contract. And I got to do what I think was the most rewarding part of my service, which was I took over as my battalion's medical training petty officer. So I got to build new curriculums for the junior medics. I got to work side by side with my battalion S3 shop with, planning out battalion level field operations and what the sort of CASEVAC plans would be, but also what the training would look like, and kind of trying to make sure that the next generation of guys would be ready to go. So during that time, actually, which this is an important part of the story, I had 2 younger siblings come to HWS. So my younger sister was class of 2020. Shout out to her as well. She was actually in her starting her fourth, or she's in her 4th year of medical school and is going OB. So go OB. And then my younger brother was class of 23. He graduated kind of right after I got out of the Navy in 22. And I thought, yeah, this Hobart place seems pretty great. I grew up in the area. I didn't ever think I would be graduating, but I'm happy to now be a statesman, and I'm still on campus working in admissions. So it's been a fun path.
Great. Thank you very much. Jay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jay, and I'm absolutely honored to be here. I'm Hobart class of 22, majored in educational studies, was a part of the Hobart football team, as well as a few other extracurriculars on campus. For me, like Lucky said, I haven't started active duty yet. I'm actually headed into the Coast Guard in December. So my lifeline and my military experience will be coming soon. So I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who's about to serve. To me, serving means putting something greater than yourself first, whether that's your team, your country, your community. It's about living by values of integrity, accountability, when no one's watching. I've always been drawn to the idea of service, not just in the military sense, but helping people and protecting communities. That's why I pursued a career right now as an EMT in Boston. The Coast Guard, though, really stood out to me because it blends both missions of safeguarding lives, defending our coasts, and even supporting humanitarian efforts. So joining the Coast Guard is essentially my way of stepping into that and becoming part of something that truly matters and something I'm dedicated to be a part of. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, next is this lovely lady sitting beside me that I married in 1967 in the St. John's Chapel the day after graduation.
Hi, everybody. I spent a long, long time living a military life. My dad was in the Army, and I am like Carmen, I think. I had never, we were living in Monterey, California when I graduated from high school. And there were a couple of things I knew. One, I was absolutely certain that my dad would get orders and leave me in California. And that, in fact, did happen. And so I had heard about William Smith. I applied, I was accepted. At the time, there were very few, hardly any students from California at the colleges. I think there were two others, but in any case, the day I arrived at Hobart and William Smith, I was my first visit to the campus. I had never even seen it before. There were no such thing as videos or anything. I had no idea what I was about to experience, but at the time it seemed like a pretty wonderful adventure. I was a political science major, also a very limited field for women at William Smith at that time. And I studied under the famous Dr. Kim. I don't, all of you are not, you're too young to know about Dr. Kim. We called him Dr. Kim. And Maynard Smith and Professor Manwaring, and they were legends in their own time. And so when I wanted to be in the Foreign Service, but unfortunately in 1967, being in the Foreign Service and being married to a fighter pilot was not exactly high on the list of possibilities. I never looked back. I loved being an Air Force spouse. I worked all kinds of different volunteer jobs. I actually had paying jobs too, but I found myself constantly involved in some kind of a service organization, whether it was the Girl Scouts or the Red Cross or Habitat for Humanity. I even led a protest in Florida because the school board was discriminating against the kids from the base who went to an underserved school. And so I had a lot of experience doing servicey type things. And it was a really wonderful life, a really, really good life. But I never lost my interest in political science, politics, news, all of that. And so, knowing people who know me know that I am deeply involved in all kinds of political things. And so, this morning, when I picked up my phone and looked at my news feed from military.com, and knowing we were going to have this webinar tonight, I was struck by an article there by a man named Darius Radzis. And it was talking about the fact that people with military background are really coming to the surface in politics in the United States today. Of course, the most obvious example is Mikey Sherrill, who's going to be the new governor of New Jersey. But according to this article, veterans, voters have a great respect for candidates who come from a military background. And in this last election, military members were elected as county executives into state houses, into mayor's races, and into state senates. And the article went on to quote a really wonderful quote from Mikey Sherrill, who said, and I think you all are going to love this. She said, "When I was 18, I swore to defend the Constitution. It taught me that leadership means carrying the weight of other people's hopes." I thought that was so really, really profound. And I think that's probably what all of you did and what all of us who were military spouses did as well. There were some other really interesting quotes. One man who had won a Virginia legislative race said, "Vets know how to fight like hell and never quit." And that too was interesting. But there was a study. The article talked about a Gallup poll that was released on the 1st of October this year that was sponsored by a foundation called With Honor. And they had a lot of really interesting statistics. So the first one was 55% of Americans are much more or somewhat more likely to vote for a candidate with military experience. The second one was 83% say that veterans possess strong leadership skills. 78% believe that veterans put country's interest ahead of politics. And 77% believe that vets work well with people from different backgrounds. Also, military.com has done a lot of studies, and they've reported that military veterans are presumed to be more trustworthy problem solvers in government, that the military teaches how to overcome obstacles, and veterans know how to earn trust, build coalitions, and talk to people who disagree. I could not have picked a more timely article for this session that we're doing today, because I think that reflects, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but it seems like that reflects pretty much the reasons that all of us have served in the military in some capacity. So that's what I have to say. Politics is still my thing. I learned it at William Smith.
Thank you, Jean. Okay, so our topic is why service, or what is service? And I've asked each of you to think a little bit about that. You've kind of touched on it, some of you a little bit here and there, but I'd like to give each of you 2 or 3 minutes. We'll go back through the list again to talk to a little bit about what service is, what it means, how it's affected you. In my case, my view of service, and I'll go first, changed dramatically from when I was first commissioned as second lieutenant on the quad at Hobart on June 11th, 1967, to when I retired 30 years later. I mean, I started off wanting to go to Air Force pilot training because I wanted to be an airline pilot, and I could go 4 years in the Air Force, be a rated pilot, and then go to the airlines and make a lot of money. Well, once I got in and started learning about service and started learning about commitment and started learning about how the team works together, that airline thing just went right off my radar, and I just kept going right on with it. And my view of service changed dramatically over the time that I was in the Air Force. So, John, we're going to back up and go back to John Norvell.
Well, I'll be first one to say that I really didn't have an understanding of what service meant when I came on active duty. I thought it just meant I had a job and I went to work every day. That was what service was. But after I went through flight training in F4 combat, I knew what service meant. It meant commitment. You touched on that theme, Dick. It meant that service became an important part of my life. And for the next let's see, that was about 7 years into the Air Force. The next 16 years, I lived Air Force every day. And the rewards of doing that was that I got to work with some of the finest men I've ever known, being in the Air Force. And it really, service became my life. And when I left the Air Force, and I tell people I've only had two employers, the U.S. Air Force and Hobart and William Smith. I went into a service job as an alumni director at Hobart and William Smith, where I worked for the colleges. And in recent years, I've done a lot of work in the local community for veterans. So I've sort of internalized the idea that service is an important part of my life.
Thanks, John. Jackie?
Well, I guess to kind of touch on the same types of things as service definitely
I think you missed it.
changed, or my thoughts on service changed during my military career. I always kind of had the sense that I wanted to serve, but I don't think I really understood what it was. And the longer I was in the military and the longer I was a physician, the more I realized that it actually touches a lot on what Jean says, is that there's an advocacy component, especially when you're in a leadership position. A big part of your job as a leader is to be taking care of your people. And part of doing that is advocating for your people, figuring out what they need, how you can help them get what they need, how you can support them in this job that is so very different from anything else patients are doing anywhere else in the world. So that became a big part of the service component for me, and a big part of why I stayed in until retirement is because I felt like my patients needed that advocate and that person to support them, and that my junior staff, my residents, my junior corpsmen also needed somebody that was there kind of supporting them and helping them figure out what was going to help them be able to be successful and have the career that they want and still remain part of the military and continue serving in the way that they were serving. So that really became a big part for me, is that service really does involve advocacy. And I had no concept of that part of service when I joined.
Interesting. Thank you, Jackie. Carmen, before I go to you, I want to remind it there in our audience, we're going to have in another 10 minutes or so a Q&A thing. And the way you do that is down at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A button, and you click into that and write your question in, and we'll work our way through them when we get kind of towards the end of what's going on. So for the audience, it's that Q&A button. Thanks, Jackie. That was wonderful. All right, Carmen.
All right, before I go on my reason why, Gene, also I really wanted to touch on what you just said. There is a program that I'm currently in. It's another grad program at the University of San Francisco. The Masters of Public Leadership. It's only for veterans, and it allows them a 2-year time frame in order to develop and grow into roles in local government, state, all the way up to federal. And it kind of trains you in what you need to know and to be well versed in order to fill those positions. So there are programs out there for this kind of need and want for veterans in order to move into local government positions, and it's really good so far. I've only been at 4 months, but I'm really liking it. So my why is I was just a young guy that really wanted to serve, and I felt like if I was 45, 50 years old, I was going to have the regret. Now, that sounds very basic and shallow, but once I was able to actually figure out what I wanted to do and become a Green Beret, I chose this route for a reason. So the Green Berets have a motto. It's called De Oppresso Liber, and that's to free the oppressed. So our job is to go into foreign countries, whether it's going to be unconventional warfare, foreign internal defense, counterterrorism, counterproliferation. We have a number of core competencies as Green Berets, but we go in there and we train their forces. And we say, hey, what are your biggest threats, and what are your deficiencies, and how can we help you? For example, I had multiple friends in 2020 that were over in Ukraine training their special forces units because they were worried that there was going to be an aggression from Russia. And obviously, soon thereafter, that occurred. And so the ability for us to go provide value to our partners and, alliances, whether it's, just north or south or across the sea, was something that I really valued and I felt like aligned with what I wanted to do. It wasn't about me just going in and kicking down doors. That's something Green Berets can do, but for us to be able to provide value and train others so that their next door neighbors, if that active aggression is going to come, they can protect themselves. So that was my main. Once I got in and I was able to really figure out what the Green Berets did, I was very thankful, and I think that we all take pride as Green Berets in doing that overall. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, Georgi.
Yeah, I mean, I think my why goes back till I was pretty young. I mean, I can remember I definitely don't come from a large military family. But for whatever reason, as kind of since I was maybe 5 years old, I started thinking about wanting to be in the military, much to my parents' dismay. And similarly, I think that, you know, as I got into serving and I got into being in the military, I I came to realize what service meant a lot more clearly. I think one of the biggest things for me was, you hear a lot about, being a part of something that's larger than you. And I think that's a very much sort of a fundamental part of my service, but something that I think I really started thinking about more um, later on, kind of in the later years that I was in, was sort of the component of giving up some level of personal agency, not just for your organization, but for the other people around you. Um, there are a lot of things that you want to do when you're in the military that you just can't do. Especially being stationed on the other side of the country from where the rest of your family is. There were holidays or birthdays that I would miss, and that's just a part of it. That's it's something that you take and you put it on the shelf, and you don't just accept that, but you come to embrace it. Kind of like what Jackie talked about. There's more day-to-day examples of that. It's not just about what your job is. It's not just about I have X, Y, and Z that I have to get done today. You rank up, and then you have juniors below you, and they have needs, and they have personal things come up. They have career prep and help that they need. They need guidance, and you need to be able to table those things that you want to get done.
Jay, you're up. John, were you
Yeah.
taking the lead there? That's fine.
Lucky, I think you're good on your side. I think Georgie's internet cut out. So
Okay.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, please.
So I touched on service a little bit prior, but I was truly introduced to service within the community when I was at HWS.
Yeah.
There was a couple things that stood out. Day of service that is implemented among all groups of students at HWS. That's an effort to help the community with either building structures or just cleaning up the community in some way, shape, or form. Um, Also, I will say that a couple other things that contributed to service on campus were going and volunteering at local community centers like Habitat for Humanity or serving lunch at the Congregational Church down the street. Some big things there are really what inspired me to develop a deeper passion for service. And that's what structured me into going and pursuing this career to be emergency medical technician. Being able to help other individuals in a way of medically performing and supporting their needs was something I really enjoyed. And that is what has geared me to pursue this obligation, this duty to serve with the United States Coast Guard. So again, I'm really looking forward to it. I don't have a lot of past experience with the military, actually none at all. Not much, not many of my family were in the military. So I'm looking to be the pioneer for this. So thank you.
That's wonderful.
Jean?
Well, the only thing I want to say is that Dick and I were just back at the colleges in September,
August. Yeah.
August or September. And that's one of the things, as someone who's been away from Hobart and William Smith regularly for a really long time, it's just so gratifying to see the way the colleges has stepped into service in teaching and helping the students learn how important service is. And I think every time we see President Guerin, we thank him for that because it's a huge contribution. The college is a wonderful, wonderful place to learn and a wonderful place to live, but it also, the motto, training students or teaching students to live lives of consequence, is just, it makes me so proud to be a graduate of William Smith College. That's the truth. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, good. Well, I agree with you on that 100%. We have some questions from the floor. The first one, John Norvell has already volunteered to answer. And the question is from Robert McGee, who says, in May of 1970, the ROTC offices in Sherrill Hall were firebombed, ending ROTC on campus. Why is that still the case? John?
Well, you have to look at the beginning of the ROTC on the campus. When Dick and I first got there in the early 60s, there were 400 students every year involved in ROTC on campus. The first 2 years, all of Hobart men had to be in ROTC. By the time we graduated, I in 66, he in 67, the detachment was down to about 30 men, maybe at most. There weren't very many still involved in the program because they did away with mandatory ROTC. So it simply became, at that point, even before the firebombing, ROTC probably was on its last legs at Hobart by that point. It simply wasn't cost effective to run a detachment for that few graduates each year. And as the Vietnam War heated up, the number of students entering into ROTC were shrinking because of the pressure of being in the military during that period. ROTC ended in 70 when the firebombing occurred, but it would never come back to campus. The Air Force or the Army, they simply would not put that kind of money into a small graduate pool that they would get out of a place like Hobart and William Smith. Bigger colleges and universities, yes. Syracuse has a big Army program. RIT has a program. I know the U of R has a program, but Hobart and William Smith is just too small to have ROTC these days. So that's the quick answer.
Yeah, and I can just add to it, not expand to it. I did my last 2 years on active duty as the commander of Air Force ROTC in Pittsburgh. And I can tell you that even if Hobart were to go to the Air Force or the Army or the Navy today and say, we want to start an ROTC organization at our college, the service would say no, for the reason that John just said, because they are looking at commissioning as a minimum 15 officers a year in order to justify the expense of having the staff there to teach them the ROTC program. And there are many small programs in the country today that only commission 4 or 5 officers a year. But the reason they have their program there is because the congressman from that area just will not let the Air Force close his or her ROTC detachment. But new ones, if it's a small school, it just isn't going to happen. And that is really a shame because one of the things that I have learned in my 50 years really of being associated with the Air Force as in uniform and as a contractor and in civil service is that a liberal arts education and military service are complementary. They are not juxtaposed. They are complementary. The officers that I served with that had liberal arts educations were every bit as good, if not better, than those with technical degrees, despite of the fact that it's a technically oriented service. But small schools, it's just not going to happen. Okay, we have another question. I think I'll ask Gene to answer this. Did the panelists have any thoughts about the political civilian influence on professional military careers?
Oh, you don't want to get me started on that.
Well,
You know, it's important to have civilians at the top of the military, as the Secretary of Defense. It's important to have civilian control. But I mean, it's everybody's nightmare to think that politics would enter into military service. It's just so against every bit of what you learn when you're a military member. You know, service before self, excellence in all we do, you know,
integrity.
devotion to your country, integrity, allegiance to the Constitution. Those are all things that you learn in the military, like the first day. And the idea of deviating from that is really hard to imagine. And I might also add, and I know Jackie will support me in this, women bring a tremendous amount of everything that's good to the military. And so women in the military, the more women in the military, the better the military will be. So that, Jackie, did I do good?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
plus, we can't overlook the fact that on day one, before you ever start, you raise your right hand and you take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. You don't take an oath to support and defend the President of the United States. You don't take an oath to support and defend any politician in the United States. It's an oath to the Constitution. Okay, I have another question. Oh, I'm getting lots of questions. Oh, wow. Oh, boy. Okay, I have to back up. Blair Minyard writes to Jay McCoy, Jay, I'm an inner city high school teacher, but my time in the Marines was the early 90s. What words would be impactful for young people to hear that might turn their heads towards a possible future in the military? How can we make this option appealing to them?
Great. Thank you, Blair, for writing that. So a couple things. I got a response to that and like a subpart to that. Just to get the heads turning, would it be to hear information regarding the military? Honestly, at my time at Hobart, I didn't hear much talk of the military at all. It wasn't until I got out that I actually did research, figured out what the military is, what they have to offer, all the different branches, all the different specialties, all the different MOSs within each branch. So just the information, I think will get people's heads turning like, oh, this is part of the, you can be a corpsman in the Navy. That's part of the military. Like, I think the whole military itself is, like not necessarily skewed, but essentially people aren't hearing enough about it, especially in high school. At least where I grew up in Vermont, so I wasn't hearing much about it in Vermont. I wasn't hearing much about it at Hobart. It wasn't until after that I was truly informed and understood what the military is. So I think that initially gets people's heads turning to understand what the military has to offer. And then the other thing to get people to possibly see a future, make it appealing to them. I mean, the military is essentially stepping into something bigger than yourself, right? It's a chance to grow, a chance to challenge who you are, to truly discover what you are capable of. As much as it is about uniform and discipline, it's also about purpose and teamwork and pride that comes from knowing essentially where you stand and how you can make a more impactful, meaningful experience for yourself and for others. I think those words are words that I heard from individuals that I talked to who have priorly served. So that is what turned my head, especially as a younger alum from Hobart, but also being introduced to the military field. So the information itself regarding the military, as well as just impactful experiences, are what I think turns the most heads.
Okay, thank you. This is from Nolan Van Shake. I'm sure I didn't pronounce that right. Class of 22. He says, I am currently an 11B station at Schofield Barracks on Oahu. What advice would the panel give to a young team leader without much experience as an NCO? And I'm going to flip that over to our most experienced NCOs, Carmen and Georgi. What advice would the panel give to a young team leader without much experience as an NCO? Carmen?
I guess I'll go first.
Yeah, go first. I'll
First of
move it
all,
over to you.
uh, congrats on being 11 Bravo. That's one of the few MOSs I respect in the Army.
What is an
But
11 Bravo? What is
it's
an
an
11?
infantry,
That's what I thought.
rifleman.
Yeah.
But so congrats on that. Being a team leader, that's it's a tough position, but it's a sweet spot in your career. You get to really hone your craft as an infantryman. You actually have a team that you get to manage. You're gonna learn uh the basics of maneuver warfare. My advice for you would be, if you have the opportunity to go to schools, it's a great time to do it. Once you move up to being a squad leader, yes, there's still those opportunities, but it becomes a lot more leadership. So I know they say never volunteer for anything in the military, but volunteer, especially as a team leader. Um, lean on your guys. They're there to support you as much as you're there to support them. Uh, Lean on your squad leader. When they need something, be the first team leader to volunteer to help them out. And always be looking for how you can do the next job up. So if you're a team leader now, even if you're a new team leader, if your squad leader has to go do something and he needs someone to manage the squad, volunteer to do that. When you're doing training evolutions and he moves into that platoon sergeant position, see if you can move into the squad leader position. Um, yeah, and have fun with it. You're on the cusp of having to do a lot of paperwork. You're not there yet, so really, really lean into the fun stuff.
Yeah, I really like that. And I'll take it a little bit of a different route here in that, like, learn who is part of your team. And it takes time and it takes effort. But the people that see you as their leader, when you invest like a lot of time and effort, they're going to respect you so much more. And I know that's not an easy thing to do. It might be, you might be, worn out at the end of the day, but have those difficult conversations. Ask how people are doing. If people know that you really, really care about them, they will put out so much more than you could believe, and that's gonna make your career better and everyone else. And I just think that's something that I saw in special forces where on such a small team, people truly invest in each other, and it makes the unit so much tighter. It makes everyone perform and trust each other to that next level. And I think that your career can really like take an offshoot from that and just really go to the next level. So just think of it that way. Invest in your people and they'll invest in you.
Thank you. Nolan has a personal message from you, you guys buddies. He says, for Jay, what MOS did you sign for and how long is your training?
Great. Nolan, thanks for asking. Um, so right now I got boot camp going until 8 weeks past December 2nd. So at that point, once I am towards the end of boot camp, I'll figure out where I'm stationed, and then I have a list of different MOSs you sign up for, and then from there you wait for that A school, and then you will go and attend it for your additional training. So there's a list of things I could sign up for. One is possibly boatswain's mate. Another is possibly to be a rescue swimmer. So there's a couple things I'm looking at. Nothing's solidified just yet, but all those interests will come into fruition when I'm in boot camp and they're presented to me. So I'll get back to you on exactly what MOS I go with. Um, and I appreciate it. Best of luck to you as well.
Okay, great. Hunter Rawlings, and I believe you're a officer in the Marine Corps, a major, maybe you're a lieutenant colonel, shared a small correction. The oath of office says officers will defend the Constitution, but the enlisted oath also says will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, and that is in fact correct. I was speaking from my limited experience as an officer. Okay, well, it's 3 minutes to closeout time for the panel. I want to thank again Mel and Crystal and Nicholas for everything they did. And thanks again to all of you vets out there that are listening. I just want you to know that the president of the colleges and his spouse, Mary, are very supportive of our committee and our efforts to make available to the administration, faculty, and students of Hobart and William Smith colleges the benefits of and the opportunities for military service. Oh, the book. Hand me the book. I got 2 minutes. I got just enough time for this. So 5 years ago, 3 years ago was the 200th anniversary of Hobart and William Smith colleges.
Hobart, not William Smith.
Oh, I'm sorry, Hobart College. And John Norvell and I wrote this book for the commemoration of that. The title is Hobart and William Smith College's Legacy of Military Service. And the first part is history of military service connected with Hobart College, which goes all the way back to one of the first trustees of Hobart College, had been a major in the Revolutionary Army. And it goes all the way up through all the different ROTC programs that were at Hobart during World War I and World War II, and the history of the military. And the last part of the book is 107 thumbnails of veterans, Hobart and William Smith veterans who have served in the military. It's half the book that I did. I don't know that the alumni office has any of these left, but I do know that the book is PDF form online on the alumni website.
Show them the back cover. The
Oh.
back cover is great.
Gene likes the back cover, so.
The colleges did have copies last year at reunion, so I think they still have a limited number of copies available. I was talking to Mel about possibly doing a reprint, so that may happen when the numbers get down, but I do believe there are a few copies available for veterans.
Good. Well, thank you, everybody. It's about ready to click over to 8 o'clock, so I think we're done. Panelists, you did great. It was wonderful. We'll probably do something like this again next year. And we do have a thing that we'll be working on for this summer that will include veterans. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. Good
Thanks,
night.
guys.